Um, so, just on the third highest industrial consumers of energy. And in addition to that, ammonia has a negligible global warming impact, but other refrigerants, not so much.
Yeah. I was really shocked actually when I first started looking into this, and this is a while back. I wrote a profile of China's first frozen dumpling billionaire, as a way to talk about this sort of Chinese, effort to build the cold chain and what it was doing to the country's food. And I wrote it for the New York Times Magazine, and they have a very rigorous fact-checking process. So after you go through all the editing, and then you have to turn over all your sources and all your taped transcripts of conversations and all your sources for all your statistics and things like this to the fact checker, who goes through them herself, calls up everybody, makes sure it's all correct, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very rigorous process, and which I love.
Mm-hmm.
But what was funny is she got to the end of my reporting and she said, listen, all your numbers about the global warming impact of the cold chain, they do check out. But if it is that big of a deal, why haven't I read about it anywhere else? Like, why am I not reading about this? And so that was back in 2013. It is a little bit more on people's radars, a little bit now. The UN had its first meeting of sort of sustainable cooling for all, etc., in 2018, I want to say. So it is just a little bit on more on people's radar. But I couldn't believe my own eyes when I first saw the data on just the global warming impact of the cold chain. And when you did the calculations for then what that would look like if the rest of the world built a developed world style cold chain. So take Bali, in the book, I went to Rwanda to see, what it looks like when a country says we're going to build a cold chain. What's the implication? So if the rest of the world builds this fully, what we consider standard in the developed world, those emissions go up 5 times. And that's before you include population growth, which is all happening in the parts of the world that don't currently have a cold chain. I mean, the population of sub-Saharan Africa is supposed to be going up by 1 billion by 2050, and that's a place where they're building the cold chain right now. They don't have one. And so think about the population increase, and then think about the fact that refrigeration is less efficient for every degree temperature. Global temperatures go up, and that's the direction they're going in. So when I looked at those statistics, and there's just literally no way that we have enough renewable energy to take the cold chain off fossil fuels at the moment. It would be really nice if we did. And that demand is growing. And as you say, you have these issues around refrigerants, which are not all problematic, but a lot of the ones that, again, are being used in places like Rwanda because they're easy to work with are the higher GWP ones. It's actually a major issue that hasn't been on people's radar. I think, again, because people are like, well, we have to have the cold chain. What do you mean it's a problem? It's like, but cooling for food has recently overtaken aviation in terms of emissions. We talk all the time about how we shouldn't be flying. We need to work out better ways. We never talk about what are we going to do about the cold chain. And I could go on about this forever, but I'll just say, when I started writing this book, I went to the library to see if there had been any other books about refrigeration for a popular audience. There had been textbooks for HVAC technicians, there had been that sort of thing, but nothing written for a popular audience since the 50s. And so I checked out the book from the 50s, and it said, told a little bit about the history, a little bit about the impact. It said refrigeration's been amazing. But honestly, it's just, the most recent step in the sort of human effort to preserve food.
Yes.
And so there's no doubt we'll come up with something really even better soon. Um, and I look forward to it, basically, was sort of the conclusion of this book. And I sort of closed the book and thought, well, we haven't done it. We sort of got refrigeration and then dropped the ball because it's great. But
It's,
yeah,
as we started saying in the first instance, is, refrigeration has been around since Mr. Birdseye
yeah,
started to freeze things 100 years ago, and nobody has questioned it. that's the astounding bit. You will be pleased to know that within the Australian cold chain particularly, we are all looking at sustainability. It is of highest progress, and it's top of mind with everything that everyone is doing. The Kigali Amendment has the potential to prevent as much as 0.5 degrees Celsius in global warming. There was a large conversation that happened.
Huge. It's huge.
Yeah. With which I mentioned before, the -18 to -15, which we have to look at because it's not so much, from where the producer comes from into the cold chain warehouse, in which you have worked, so you know kind of how that works, and then that goes into a truck, and it's kind of after that. And you look at maybe going from Woolworths or Coles or Aldi or wherever you're going, getting it home. I live in the subtropics, so I whack it into the back of the car, sometimes in a little fridgy thing, but when I say a fridgy thing, it's a bag that has silver inside. But getting that, you don't stop and talk to someone, for an hour or so and then make your way home. You need to get that into your fridge quick smart. You do not leave it sitting on the bench. So the conversation is that the -18 to -15, all good and well, but it gives lesser time, less opportunity to
less of a
give you some
buffer.
space. And ice cream obviously is a bit of an issue there because the mouthfeel. Do we want to leave? There's just on ice cream, there is a new way of making ice cream, and when it was, rather than patenting it, said person has given it to everyone and said, look, this is the way you can do it, to store it at a higher temperature. So, what is the future of food preservation? We've got solar paneling, we've got, all sorts of different ways to save money. And as I said, our guys are doing, guys and girls, of course, are doing the maximum that they can do to make sure that we're doing the right thing from the planet. But can we use food to preserve food? Should we reduce our reliance on cold storage? How?
So I think this is the most exciting part, actually, because when you think about what a huge impact refrigeration has had, well, then you start thinking, well, if we make changes, we could have an equally huge impact. And no one would deny there are huge problems with our food system in general. So perhaps refrigeration can be the tool that helps us overall improve how we're eating and how we're growing food. And so some of the things I'm really excited about are, first, just on a sustainability, with the current system we have, there's some really great work going on with ice batteries, and actually a fellow, Julian Hudson, out of Melbourne, who's Melbourne?
Adelaide.
Adelaide, thank you. Doing really good work, pioneering that as a way to decarbonize cooling, and say we can use a thermal battery to keep this facility running and cold when the renewables are offline, which happens, and so just to take cooling off the grid like that. And that's a key first step, and that needs to happen, and a few places are doing it. I mean, it's an uphill struggle to convince people to try anything new in cold chain, honestly, because
it costs a lot of money. It costs a lot.
It costs a lot of money, and you need the incentives to pay it off. You need the incentives to make either you make the fossil fuels cost so much, or you incentivize switching, or you do both. In government, that's a place for government, honestly. That's not a place that's going to resolve itself. But the other thing is new methods of cooling. Now, people have tried for generations with things like magnetocaloric and things like that, but we are actually starting to see some breakthroughs, and this is not something I wrote about in the book, but with barocaloric cooling, these kinds of cooling where you just sort of honestly adjust the direction of the molecules, it has a thermal effect, which the physics is sort of beyond me, but it's incredible. These have been in the lab. People have said, oh, they're great for reaching really cold temperatures. They are no way feasible for, industrial scale applications. Well, for the first time in Cambridge, England, there's now a machine running that gets to the same, it's actually better efficiency than an industrial machine using this barocaloric cooling. So the real obstacle now is, can you make that machine? Can the Daikyns of this world, and can they make that machine at scale so that it reaches a comparable price point with the conventional technology? Because at that point, yes, you have to sort of waver. It's basically a little bit of pressure. Barocaloric is putting a little bit of pressure on a material and then out again. So it's it requires some energy. Everything in life requires some energy, but it's an absolute minuscule fraction of what is used for current cooling, and it doesn't require, any of these chemical refrigerants. So, I mean, the material it's used in talcum powder. So it's really an exciting technology, but a huge hurdle, because unless you can make it at scale, no one's going to adopt it. And so again, that's a place where there really needs to be investment, because this technology is finally sort of ready for prime time, but we don't have time for it to get lost and yeah.